forecast for the week of September 16th, 2024. What a week. Wow, there's a lot of stuff going on this week for sure. We have the lunar eclipse. We have all kinds of aspects going on throughout the week that are related to the lunar eclipse. And then we have the sun going into Libra at the end of the week on the 22nd. A lot of stuff going on this week. So what we want to say about this, first of all, we have to remember that we are in the midst of eclipse season. And in the midst of eclipse season, everything seems a little extra, especially around lunar eclipse. And this is a lunar eclipse. It's a full moon. You just take that energy of the full moon and you'll see that, it's that kind of lunacy is in the air. Things seem a little extra at the full moon and a little extra at the full moon in Pisces, and a little extra when it's a lunar eclipse on top of all. And I might add a little extra when the eclipse is the moon at the eclipse is closely conjunct to Neptune, which in and of itself tends to make things a little extra. In other words, the lesson we're taking out of this first part is things seem a little exaggerated. You probably are looking at something that is real as an issue or an opportunity. It's probably real, but it's likely to look a little bit more than it otherwise would. And, we just want to kind of keep that in mind as we go through. We're going to note that there's going to be an extra bit of emotionality, and that's going to affect all of us, and it's going to get the better of some of us. But there's something interesting about this, and really we could almost look at the entire week here based upon the eclipse energy, because the eclipse is the full moon, and the moon at the eclipse is very close to Neptune. It means that the sun is opposite Neptune. So over the course of the next few days, the sun will get into an exact opposition with Neptune. Uranus is also in this configuration. It's trine to the sun this week, and Pluto is trine to the sun. So we have what's called a kite formation. It looks a lot like a kite. And it takes the energy of the eclipse and adds extra flavor to it. So Neptune, things can seem a little extra as a descriptive approach to this Neptune. It can make things seem a little bit out of proportion. It can make things seem more important than they otherwise would. Prescriptively, Neptune says, well, if the going gets tough, get going. In other words, Neptune offers the possibility of a little escapism. And if things get really hot, escape, take some time out. That's sort of a prescription for how to work with this. The trines to Uranus and Pluto, however, Uranus at 27 of Taurus, Pluto at 29 of Capricorn, this essentially knits together a grand trine in Earth. And if we take this in a positive sense, and we really should, then it's kind of like whatever comes up can be negotiated into something that has a new Uranus, creative kind of approach. And with Pluto, I feel it's a little bit of like we can kind of let go a bit of some of the past. So this is it's potentially tense. There's no getting around that. Potentially tense time. But it's not necessarily the kind of thing where we're not going to have options. We're going to have a lot of options. We can probably negotiate, we can use a little diplomacy, we can use a little creativity to find new ways of doing things, which is great. And we can, if that doesn't work, Neptune says, well, we'll just take some time out. If you follow this kind of thing, you'll note that Uranus is at 27 of Taurus, Neptune is at 28 and change of Pisces, and Pluto is at 29 degrees of Capricorn, which means that we have very, very short moon void times, generally speaking. The moon doesn't go void for a very long period of time because it'll make an aspect to one of those planets. And then just a couple of hours later, or even sometimes a few minutes later, we'll go into the next sign. We don't have that downtime. And sometimes you can kind of appreciate a nice moon void. Sometimes you can kind of appreciate a time when you sort of step back and let things flow a little bit, take care of routine tasks. We don't really have a lot of those kind of opportunities with no moon void times. It's not bad. I mean, generally speaking, avoiding the moon void is something that we would like, but there's no downtime. There's no downtime built in, and that's especially true. We really feel it especially strongly at eclipse season. So kind of keep that in mind. That's maybe your second takeaway. Or maybe it's like the fourth by now, I think, anyway. Let me just get this right over here. On the we're heading towards, on the 21st, Mercury is going to square Jupiter. Now, previously, Mercury was opposite Saturn, and that had a little bit of a, you got to watch what you say. You got to be kind of careful about things. You might be misinterpreted a little bit, or you might be called out for what you say. Mercury square Jupiter. Mercury's in Virgo and Jupiter is in Gemini, which is Mercury's sign. And the feeling for this, I would say, the 20th, the 21st, maybe spilling over a bit into the 22nd, is you could say too much. You could take a detail that might otherwise just be a detail and kind of make it into something a little bit bigger. And it's not the complete potential for, loudmouth rhetoric that we might otherwise have because of the signs involved. But Mercury, Jupiter, you could say more than you intend, especially with the sun at this point in time coming into an opposition with Neptune. So as we get towards the end of the week, that Neptunian energy is very strong. And Mercury, Jupiter might kind of take a hold of that a little bit. So just, be aware. Again, you might say more than you intend. You might hear more than somebody else intends. So kind of keep that in mind. Venus. Venus is in her home sign of Libra. And again, this is towards the weekend. We're getting to the 21st, 22nd over here. Venus squares Pluto. And this is Venus in Libra. This is all about manners and decorum and things being nice. And square to Pluto, who doesn't care about such things? Pluto in Capricorn, very much the power broker. This is kind of like, I couldn't help but come up with this unhelpful analogy for this. It's a little bit like if you were like an interior designer and you get this really wonderful job, like working for some big bank, but they really, they want things to be a certain way. And you can do it. You can do it. You can follow the formalities. So that unhelpful analogy aside, the feeling is that, like, we want to kind of stay within the rules. We want to kind of do the right thing, mind the manners. And it's probably the way to go. It's probably the way to go. And yet there can be some uncomfortable moments there. There can be some uncomfortable moments as we sort of recognize that we're being diplomatic with folks that maybe have a strong power agenda. Venus gets a little taste of this energy while she's still in her sign of Libra. But of course, with Pluto at 29 and change of Capricorn, the first thing that happens right after that is that she leaves her home sign and goes into Pluto's sign of Scorpio. And this happens on Sunday. When it comes to any sort of business dealings, when it comes to even socializing, negotiating and working things out could be a little tough. There could be some effort involved in negotiating. Um, I feel that it's possible, though. I feel that the energies in general are favoring the possibility, at least, of working things out. But, then Venus goes into Scorpio, and we get this real strong sense of like, this is a little bit more closed up in terms of socializing and romance and stuff. It becomes a little bit, we'll get down to the nitty gritty. Venus, remember, is so happy in her home sign of Libra, where it's all about using the right fork. And she goes into Scorpio, and it's not about that. This is the person, like, who's in command of their own world, let's say. And they like things the way they like them, and it's nice and everything is good. And then, they gotta then they gotta go down to, oh, I don't know, the bank and get a loan, or they got to go pay their taxes or something along those lines. Or maybe they got to bring their car into the repair place. And now you're in an environment that works very, very differently. And all of those things that you're the master of or the mistress of, excuse my languaging there. All of those things are not so important anymore. It doesn't work in this environment. And that's what we're likely to feel as we get towards Sunday and start going into next week with socializing, is that we feel like the environment has shifted quite a bit. For most of this week, formalities, playing by the rules and stuff like that is the way to go. And then we get to the weekend, and all of a sudden it's that bare bones. What's the real facts here? What are we really doing? For relationships that are in a vulnerable place, one way or the other, I should say at a tipping point, one way or the other, the weekend could be really significant. For most people, it won't be very much. It might be a little crossword or eye rolling or something like that. But for most of us, it won't be very much. But for some people who are in that spot of it being at a tipping point, you could decide, okay, are we gonna sort of move away, or are we gonna move closer? Just kind of keep that in mind. Very, very strong energy for people who are at that tipping point. So we have a week where the sun is going to oppose the moon at a lunar eclipse, then go on to trine Uranus, oppose Neptune, trine Pluto, and then the sun goes into Libra. For those of us in the northern hemisphere, this means that for a day, the days and the nights are the same length. And then the days get shorter and shorter and shorter, and you can really feel them dwindling down a few minutes a day. And so we're really in the midst of that as we sort of go underground until March at the spring equinox. For those of you in Australia and below the equator, of course, it means it's the beginning of springtime. Good for you.